91's annual Infrastructure Investment Forum took place today, focusing on the country's infrastructure needs and how private-public partnerships can assist in addressing the issues. On the sidelines of the event, I caught up with the Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa and started off by asking him to share his perspective on the smaller contribution that the agriculture sector has on the economy. Here's that conversation.
I'm not really worried about the sector declining as a share of the overall economy, because the reality is, yes, other sectors have grown faster than agriculture, but agriculture on itself has actually done well. You think back in 1994 on where we were and where we are today, you can adjust the values for inflation, but the point is that the sector has more than doubled in value terms, more than doubled in volume terms. So there is growth that is there in the sector. And it's exactly as you say about finding the areas of growth where they are. And we've seen much more better expansion in the fruits and the vegetable space, and in the red meat space also we are seeing exciting growth. So I would say the sector is in a better position.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about infrastructure investment today, and I'm wondering if there are any low-hanging fruits that infrastructure investment can help the agricultural sector to pick.
There are many more gaps that are in the sector, because if you ask us about what's the major headache that we have now, it's around the logistics, it's around the energy space, and also on the water infrastructure space. These are all of the areas that I think the various partners that are here at 91's infrastructure conference can pretty much look at and say, where should they be investing on that? There's also areas for further growth in South Africa's agriculture where we don't have farm infrastructure. Either you are thinking about silos, you are thinking about cold storage, you are thinking about pack houses, and these are some of the medium-scale investment projects that I think many people can look at the sector and say, perhaps instead of being involved in a large-scale infrastructure project, I can look at certain business that are exciting and try to invest and assist those in growing the farm economy in South Africa.
Well, talking about these headaches, actually, does it provide maybe some sort of concern in terms of more barriers to entry?
It does certainly provide the headache, because then if you are new in the sector and there's already these large capital requirements for energy, that's going to be a major issue for you. But also in as far as the logistics, if you don't have a fleet to actually be moving your product, or you are still in medium scale where you don't really require to have yours but to hire from other people, these are all becoming the key issues, which is why when we talk about the new commercial black farmers or agro-processors, we emphasize a lot the fact that they need to be supported to produce at scale so that they can overcome to an extent some of the barriers.
Well, actually, just even looking at the last GDP figures that came out, agriculture was one of the sectors with the most headwinds over there. And I'm wondering, you know, in terms of weighting of challenges over there, how much of that is what is happening at the ports, and also maybe climate issues?
I mean, starting on the climate stuff, it's one of the key issues. I mean, I'm no scientist, I'm an economist, but it does seem to us that with the intensity of climate change, we're also seeing that the occurrence of animal diseases begin to be a big issue. And if you think about South Africa's agriculture, over the past 3 years, we saw a lot of outbreaks in cattle industry, foot and mouth disease, in poultry, avian influenza as of last year, in piggery industry, African swine fever, and all of these intensified last year. And I think that they weighed on the sector's performance, because the key things, Nati, is the fact that livestock and poultry makes up roughly half of the agricultural gross value added. And if there are headwinds on that subsector, you do see these being mirrored. But again, to your second point about the infrastructure, those remain the core issues, because then the income farmers get on fruit because of those delays, those decline, and those are part and parcel of the products and the factors that really weighed on our farm economy last year.
Of course, we also don't operate in isolation here in South Africa. You did mention that 60% of what we produce, we export. And just talking about, climate change, you mentioned the green laws that, for example, being implemented in the EU. How much do these international policies affect the agricultural sector?
They are a big issue because at the end of the day, for whatever product that we put out in the market, it has to comply with these standards. I mean, the EU story that you're mentioning about the green laws, about 28% or so of our agricultural products go to the EU. And then we have, of course, 38% to Africa. But the point is, within the EU, as well as in Asia, there's a lot more of the regulatory matters that are in place that South Africa has to comply with, which is why then producing in a climate-friendlier way is always something that we cope with. But in second to the issues of climate, the geopolitics are also some of those key important things that we were watching. Because without that access to those key markets, then South Africa's agricultural fortunes get to be bleak.
Yeah. Also, electricity, you mentioned it at some point as well. I do understand that in terms of assisting the industry, I guess, to be more productive in a state of load shedding, there's load curtailment that has been implemented. But I'm also just wondering, how much capacity does the agricultural sector have in terms of bringing in renewable energy to help its resilience against load shedding?
We are trying the best we can to have some of the renewables, but of course we don't have the capacity or the financial muscle like the mining industry gets to have, because at the end of the day you are dealing with family enterprises in large part in here. But you do see some of the renewable projects that have come online in the sector, particularly in the fruits and the meat industry. That's where we've seen some of the exciting projects. Certainly in the Western Cape, Mpumalanga, those are some of the areas that we are seeing. But the hope is that going forward, especially the fact that the government has also launched what they call the Agro Energy Fund, which cross-subsidizes to an extent some of the renewable projects that can be put in farming. We hope that that will be part and parcel of greening the South African agricultural sector.
That was Wandile Sihlobo from AgBiz.